As today's hybrid workforce grows, our connection to the office has changed. And with that, so has the task of sending mail to the entire operation.
That's going to be about really thinking outside the box. I think that's really kind of the idea of creativity, right? It's okay, this is what I see today, but what could it be?
In this episode of the Outside In podcast, Operations Manager Kimberly Hamamoto shares how digital mail software paired with ISC's technology can modernize mail processes for your firm.
We get all of the mail there for all the offices, and then we open it, sort it, scan it, and then we profile it directly into their document management system.
On Outside In, we talk about the processes and sometimes the pushback that accompanies change.
What do you mean you're taking away my paper, you're taking away my files? I'm gonna have to work in a completely different way that I've never worked before. It's scary and it's new.
And how adaptable support yields reliable solutions, no matter the challenge.
It's a collaborative effort. I think that's really the name of the game for all of our partnerships.
Learn more about digital mail and ISC support on Outside In with guest Operations Manager Kimberly Hamamoto. I want to officially welcome you to the Outside In podcast. Can you give us just a real quick background on what you're doing at ISC right now?
Absolutely. I am a operations manager out of Southern California. I support 9 accounts throughout the region, as well as one in Northern California. And I provide support as far as recruiting, training, procedures, also assisting with managing of the contract, amendments, and anything that's needed for both my clients as well as my employees.
Excellent. So obviously we kind of talked about it just a few seconds ago about how we both have history backgrounds. We both, I imagine, never imagined ourselves in facilities management, probably didn't know what it was in college. I know I didn't. So how did you end up in this very interesting and unique field?
That's a wonderful question. And I often think about this when I'm talking to people and potential recruits and everything, is that I actually started because my oldest brother was working for one of our clients. And so I graduated with a history major, and he said, "Oh, I think there is a job, and they work at our company, but they're not our company." And that's when I got my introduction to IST. I went in for an interview for a service specialist position, and I got hired that day, and that was 14 years ago. So it's been a wonderful journey of a lot of different experiences, a lot of different positions, a lot of different roles, and here I am today, and it's turned into a career for me. So that's how I first met IST through my oldest brother. So I thank him every day for everything I've been able to do with the company.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I started in the field also, so I just randomly actually got a mailer to my house after I graduated, and I was about to get married and needed a job. And so I took that replied, and they hired me on a Thursday, and the Monday I was at a field location sorting mail and making copies and doing all the different things. So totally get it. IC definitely always moves fast.
Yes, very fast.
Excellent. So we brought you on today because we want to talk about mail. We want to talk about handling mail at a multi-campus location. And more importantly, we want to talk about how we handle mail in this new digital world. And I know you got a lot of experience in that. So I was hoping you could kind of walk us through the digital mail experience that you're performing for one of our clients.
Absolutely. It's a collaborative effort. I think that's really the name of the game for all of our partnerships. And it's really about when we first started, and this was back in 2018 when we first started with the client, is we did an assessment and we said, "Hey, what's your need? What software are you using?" We provided information on our software and ultimately decided to go with the existing software that they had, their document management system, to be able to provide the service for them. And then we really fit within that. And that's really what IST is really great about doing, is doing an assessment, providing all the information, and then ultimately doing whatever is going to serve the client best. In that case, so we started from all paper, mail, and then how are we going to get it from that physical format into a digital format for our client? And then it was an evolution. And so we threw around a lot of different ideas. we actually ended up settling on the idea of centralizing everything. So our team actually works out of one office in Northern California. But we were throwing around the idea of should we have two locations, maybe one north and one south. And that's always what we do whenever we do those assessments or implementations, is really getting the full scope of whatever their current process is, and kind of how their process is going to evolve and what the end result is that we want. Um, and it was a labor of love and a lot of hours and a lot of meetings, and we ended up deciding to, like I said, centralize it in one location. We get all of the mail there for all the offices, and then we scan it, or we actually technically we open it, sort it, scan it, and then we profile it directly into their document management system using a standardized naming convention. And that was also all of those processes, all that information that I just relayed to you was approved by our client, and discussed and adjusted accordingly throughout the process. And even to this day, as things continue to evolve, that's the way it works. And that's really for any client that we go through, is some kind of want that full let's go full conversion from hard copy mail to digital. And then some of them want kind of a hybrid of in between, like, okay, we want you to scan these things but not these things. So each one is going to be a little bit unique. But ultimately, the greatest thing for that particular client is that when the pandemic hit, it was something, that when everyone went to remote working, it was smooth. And then even the hybrid schedule is another thing. Sometimes they're in the office, sometimes they're not. Our team is always in the office taking care of that need for them, and that's really what allows them to be so flexible and so versatile. And that's what we always talk about for any current and future clients, is that ability and that flexibility that brings for them.
Awesome. I want to back up a little bit here. So they got 9 locations. Before IST, mail's going directly to each location. How did y'all determine it was going to be more efficient and faster for them to get their mail by sending it all to just one location? Because that seems odd.
That's another wonderful question, and it was something we threw around as far as what makes the most sense. I think really for us, what we decided was the best reason for that is focusing our team. And so a lot of it has to do with coverage, about training, about all those things that are an investment in our employees. And we said that rather than having them spread out through 9 different locations throughout California, it made more sense to centralize them. That way you have a strong base, not only for the actual operation itself, for coverage, for training. So basically, what we did was we took the head count that was spread out through 9 offices and basically centralized it into one location. Well, like I said, originally we were also discussing the possibility, because they are throughout California, maybe it made sense to do one in Southern California and then one in Northern California. But I think ultimately we decided that it made more sense to really centralize it in one office due to the space that they had within that office. So their floor plan allowed for us. We were a pretty big team in the beginning. We've scaled down and adjusted. Same thing. We're adaptable. Adjusted as we've ramped up, as we've gotten more seasoned employees. Our numbers have adjusted accordingly. But either way, they had the footprint in that office to be able to accommodate a large team of IST employees. So that was our explanation for that, and it made a lot more sense that basically, like I said, we could take the head count, spread throughout 9 offices, and centralize it into one.
Excellent. I love that y'all were doing this pre-pandemic, which is amazing. It's showing that forethought that digital mail is where we need to go. How did the firm, and then through IST, how did they come to that decision that that was the approach they needed to take, was a digital mail approach?
Absolutely. They saw that was really the future. That's where it was going. That's not, and they want to be really ahead of it rather than behind it. I think that that's really where, a lot of firms have to make that decision. When does it make sense to go into the digital file, and, from a hard copy file into that digital environment? And it's not an easy change for any firm. This particular practice group, for that, for the majority of their attorneys, it made sense. It wasn't something that required a lot of originals, a lot of hard copy. So for them, it was a more natural progression than some of our other clients that we've discussed this with, who've said, "Hey, we actually really need to retain the originals for these particular practice groups." So that was one of the factors to consider. There was really only one particular document type that was really required to be retained in hard copy. The rest of it, once they had a digital version of it and it was profiled to their now electronic file, they no longer needed the paper. So it was just taking up space and taking up room. Those were the other real factors that made it a smart decision for the firm, was really looking at real estate, and that's a cost for them. So how do they kind of manage that? What do they want to do in the future? And that was really the answer for them, was we have a whole bunch of space taken up by paper that we don't necessarily need, paper that's hard to access, paper that's hard to manage. Does it make more sense to invest in this partnership with IST and really be forward thinking and say, hey, let's get rid of the paper. Let's, here, line in the sand, going forward, everything is digital, and then start working on the backlog of everything that they have historically that is still retained in hard copy. That's also what our team helps with for some of the offices.
Excellent. So you talked a lot about paper, being able to get rid of paper. Obviously, you can't always. I'm always curious when you go into a digital mail situation, how do you handle the magazine that shows up? And now you're in a centralized world. So how are y'all handling that stuff that you just can't scan?
Absolutely. For that was part of the discussion, was do we send everything up there and now all the addresses are no longer active addresses, or do we do sort of a hybrid to accommodate for that? So that was what was discussed throughout all of the offices, and we figured out was the most efficient way was to keep those addresses active. So as far as service of legal documents, the centralized hub in Northern California is listed. As far as, if you have any matter related mail, please send it to this location. But for anything that is a magazine, for anything that is still professionally related but does not require us to scan it in or save it to their document management system, that is still an active address, and any of the attorneys in those offices can use those to receive mail. And there is still support staff for the firm support staff in each of those offices to handle that. So they actually, what happens is they receive the mail, they sort it out. If it's a magazine, they deliver it directly. If it is client matter related, then they scan it into us at the hub, and then we profile it in a digital format. So we never touch that mail, but we will also help with the process of making sure that that gets profiled accordingly and taken care of. And then as far as the hard copies, we retain those for what we established as a safe amount of time. In the beginning, we had decided on 90 days was a good hold period. So if something happens and they do actually want the original for whatever reason, we retain it for 90 days in case something is needed. And same thing for those other offices. So they'll retain that mail they've scanned us for 90 days. And then after that point, it is properly shredded and disposed of.
Excellent. So obviously, training the IST staff's one thing, but it's a completely entirely different thing to train the client's staff and their users. And this is just a very different process that takes time getting used to. Like you said, you got to determine, hey, does it go to my local office? Does it go to the centralized office? This is how I'm going to receive it. So, how did y'all train these people, give them the material they needed to be able to understand how these processes were going to work?
That was I like to call it the California tour. So I was assigned as part of the implementation team that worked on it to go to each office. I believe I hit 8 of the 9. I didn't do all of them. My one of the person I was working under took care of one of the offices because I wasn't available. But we went in, we partnered with the training individual in the IT department who did the majority of the presentation as far as how they as a firm will interact with the product that we put into the system. And then I did a quick 15-20 minute introduction as far as we're IST management services. This is how we're going to be handling the mail going forward. If you have any questions, here's our contact information. So each of those office received a training session, 2 or 3, depending on the size of the office, for us to be able to train the attorneys and the secretaries. And then I stayed around for somewhere between a week or week and a half to actually assist with the training for the clerks in those offices to be able to help them set them up with the scanning, explain to them how the IST hub works, where they would scan, and how that would be handled once we get the digital content. Also, so that they could be connected with us and kind of have a face that could go along with that. So if they had any questions, if anything happened, they had a person that they had kind of an introduction to who IST was and how we assisted the firm.
Excellent. So one of the things with a any multi-office is you got to be consistent across the board at all the offices, but you also have unique circumstances at each office. So how do you find that balance between modifying what IST does to make sure we're providing the right service for that office, but still being consistent?
That was the wonderful thing about the firm is they decided when they were going to roll this out, there was going to be consistency throughout. So that was something that we didn't really have to struggle with as much in the sense of if there was, and there was at every single office, every single meeting, it was they would kind of give some feedback and say, "Oh, I think that, for that particular document type, I think this would be a better thing, or can we handle it this way?" And then we would run that up to the or the head office and say, "Hey, this is, some feedback we got from this office or that office. Does it make sense to make that adjustment?" So the nice thing is that we actually were able to kind of blend it all together and I think come up with the best outcome as far as pull all the ideas from the field and then make a centralized, this is how we handle everything. And of course there are some people who were like, I really don't like this, and oh, can we do it this way? And our answer always went back to, I do understand what you're saying. It is that has actually been brought up by other individuals. However, to have consistency, to have a standard procedure for everything so there isn't confusion, so that you get a nice, even thing from anybody. This is why we're handling it in this particular fashion. So, and the interesting thing is, I was actually out in the field when a lot of this was happening, and so I was helping with profiling, and we made one change to the titling the document name. And it was funny because the our on-site operations manager reached out to me and he's like, "Hey Kim, we actually changed this and this is why we changed it." So I said, "Oh, okay, yep." So and then I had that in my pocket as far as, okay, so it continued to evolve with the feedback that was provided uh, as we rolled it into each office, which was, like I said, it was a nice evolution to get to standard process. And what started as a very simple Excel spreadsheet on my personal desktop ended up evolving into what we call our naming convention spreadsheet. So it has a whole list that includes also the different practices. So there's longshore subrogation that includes, as we kind of found those needs throughout the offices, it continues to evolve and adjust accordingly. So that way we can, like I said, provide a standard product for them. Understanding, like I said, it's not set in stone. We're always here to make adjustments accordingly.
Okay. So I love all that. And I love that we're using their technology, but obviously ISC is really proud of its technology. And obviously you got a bunch of other clients and they're using our technology. How have you tied or married the two technology offerings together so that we're still getting that standardized IST reporting? We're still getting the advantages of what we made, but they're getting the advantage of the document management system that they picked that's best for them.
Absolutely. We have we have a whole suite of software. And so what we did during the implementation phase was say, okay, we're not going to use our document management system, but there are other systems that we have created in-house that would help us with tracking. So we actually adapted our work order system to handle the new files. So we said, okay, we actually work with two of the firm um, clerks who set up new files, but our team actually gets the documents originally and breaks them all apart. So we were trying to figure out a communication system of how can we work together and kind of be looking at the same thing so they'll know when it's ready for them to do their part of it and where everything is in the process. And that's how we ended up using our work order system to say, hey, we have a system that tracks things. Let's use this. And to this day, we use it. So every single new file that hits our hands, we put into the work order system. We actually even adapted it slightly so that the firm's clerks can actually have access and see it. And so it's a nice way of being able, a communication tool that way. The other thing that we started using in a unique way is our copy track system. So we use copy track for a different group of documents that is basically the file has been set up and it's 600 pages of miscellaneous documents that our team has received for to kind of update the files. So our team uses that as our tracking system, similar to what we use copy track for print, scan, copy request. But we said, hey, we don't really do that for the firm, but we can use this tool to be able to track that, so we can see, are we within SLA? What's the next job that's due? Prioritizing all the things that the system was built for, that we adapted to really fit the need of our client. Those are the two main systems. We also have been using our service track system, or our meter reads, to be able to start capturing scan counts. So we don't support we don't take care of the equipment there, but we did identify the value and the importance of being able to track the volumes. So we use that for tracking scan volumes. So like I said, we use our systems to help provide that reporting aspect of it, to be able to kind of get that blend of, yes, we're not using our document management system necessarily, but we are using a lot of the other tools to be able to report on volumes and trends for our client.
Awesome. I'm gonna do a really weird movement real quick. Sorry. The energy efficient turn off themselves lights. I hadn't moved enough. Okay, so what we talked about earlier, and I love, is that the firm was forward thinking. They understood that this is the future, and they started down this path in 2018. But obviously, the world changed greatly. The office environment changed greatly in 2020. We're still trying to figure out what that world of office work is now. What is that hybrid? What is that remote? How have you adjusted the systems and services now that it is a much more hybrid approach?
Absolutely. We have actually changed the majority of what we implemented in 2018. I'm happy to say, because I guess we did a really wonderful job, that the basics of it have remained the same. So they still get, what happens is when we profile either as a standard piece of mail or a rush piece of mail that goes into their mail queues. All that has been, since they rolled into the program, still stays the same. Some of the adjustments that we have made, though, is the faxes. Used to receive faxes in hard copy faxes that then in the office they would scan to us. As I said, the office clerk would go in there and scan it. But since then, the firm has gone to a digital, an electronic faxing. And so we get those directly. So no one has to scan them, nothing has to happen. Our team just gets them in one of the folders that we just profile directly from there. So that's been the other move that they're really working on too, is also even the service, electronic service. So rather than getting a hard copy version of a document through the mail, they actually just get it electronically and into a box that we then profile directly from. So that's really the move that's been happening in the shift. And I think that's really across the board as far as how are we receiving the content. It was a lot of paper in 2018. The evolution of that is now we're receiving things less in paper and more in digital, which at the end of the day, we handle the same way. It's just actually going to cut out a few of the steps. So when we receive the hard copy mail, still we'll open the envelope, date stamp it, sort it into whatever pile, and then scan it. And then it's now ready for upload into the management system. When we receive something electronically, we cut out the first few steps, but the end result is going to be the same as far as how it's going to look for an end user or for an attorney. They're going to see it in the same fashion. It's going to look exactly the same as if we had scanned it.
Excellent. So obviously hybrid is here to stay. The office environment is always changing. You've had a first hand seat on how to create an amazing digital mail program. If what are 3 tips you would give to an organization that thinks digital mail is where they need to be, and how they could look at it so that they could implement it?
I think the first thing for a lot of it is buy-in. So that's really the most important thing for any environment is the really determining, okay, we're going to do this and we're not going to have any deviation from that as far as, just like I said, from when we're talking about standardization. It's we can't have, okay, some people are on it or some people aren't. It's really making that commitment and saying, this is how we're going to run it. We're going to take all the mail and we're going to go digital. That's step number 1. Step number 2 is really doing an assessment of how you're going to, the process you're going to implement, that is a fairly standard one. Like I said, what I explained there, you open it, you scan it, you profile into the document management system or whatever system that you're going to have. If you're more in a corporate environment, we actually do that for one of my other sites. We, when it went to, the office is closed, nobody's here, that was the same thing, but instead we forward it via email and we're working with them as far as, how do you want us to handle it. But either way, like I said, that's really the second piece of it, is how is your end user who usually receives a physical piece of mail now going to receive it digitally? Is it going to be in their email inbox? Is it going to be something that you're going to adjust your document management system to now be able to provide an electronic, mail inbox? What is that going to look like from when we touch it as an IST team to when the end user gets it in their hand, or no longer in their hand, in their inbox? And then from there, it's really just, like I said, just doing the implementation in that process of, okay, going from the concept to the end result. And it's, like I said, change is hard, and it's an evolution, and it's not, you just keep doing it on and on. So those are really the 3 points that I would say are the most important as far as making that determination. Yes, we're going to do this. The second thing would be really figuring out how you want it to look. And then the third thing is how you want to implement it, and kind of really the time frame that you're looking to have that conversion completed by.
Great, great. So I got one last question for you, and I think it really ties back into everything you've been talking about, even though it's a little out there. So um, I'm all about creativity and the creative process. It's kind of that fiber that ties everything I do together here at IST, because I do a bunch of really tasks that don't seem to go together. And one of the crazy things I love is Ratatouille, and I loved in Ratatouille when they talk about anybody can cook. And in my mind, it's anybody can be creative, because so often creativity gets confused with artistic ability, and that's not what creativity is. So I'm just curious, how do you bring creativity and the creative process to work every day?
That's going to be about really thinking outside the box. I think that's really kind of the idea of creativity, right? It's the, okay, this is what I see today, but what could it be? And I talk a lot about that with my teams. I actually have had a lot of conversations even this week about that, as far as, here's where we are today, here's where we were, where do we want to go? And then really throwing all the ideas out there, even crazy ones, and saying, what really is going to work, and being open to ideas and really collaborative. That's the other really big aspect of it that I think is the best part of teams, is being able to have a lot of different perspectives and not being afraid to say something that maybe seems so outlandish, because who knows? I mean, that's something where maybe that's not where you are today, but that's where you can go. And I think that that's really ties into all the things that we talked about as far as digital mail. For any firm that hasn't made that transition, it seems like such a crazy idea of, what do you mean you're taking away my paper, you're taking away my files? I'm going to have to work in a completely different way that I've never worked before. It's scary and it's new. And I don't know how I'd ever get there. And then pretty soon it's 5 years later, and it was like it has always been this way. So I think that's really the creativity, the aspect of it, is really thinking outside the box and not being afraid to really explore new ways of doing things.
100%, and I love it. You said it's not being afraid to explore, and it's being open to listening to everybody's perspective, because when you can create an environment where people feel safe to express those ideas that are might be a little crazy, a little different. And maybe it's not that you take all of that crazy idea, but you take a little bit of this one and a little bit of that one, and then you're able to blend them together. And then, like you said, 5 years later, you've got a amazing digital mail process that's making these end users' lives easier than they could have ever imagined, and far better than when they were receiving physical mail.
Absolutely.
Perfect. What this has been a pleasure. I said it's going to take 15 minutes. I think we've gone for 40, so it's clearly been a fun conversation. So I just want to thank you again for giving us time and joining us today, because this has been wonderful.
Thank you so much, Brad. Same to
Thank
me.
you.
Thank you to our production team, Lance Gardner, Amy Godwin, Lacey Pepe, Jose Ruiz Velasco, and Eric Willis. To learn more about ISC Management Solutions and how they can benefit your business, check out iscmanagement.com and follow us on LinkedIn. To hear more Outside In, subscribe on your preferred listening platform.